Hi everyone, welcome to Potluck Food Talks. Today we're on another episode of our Mugaritz Chronicles with my man Phil W. and Kevin, the Koji Whisperer. How you guys doing?
Doing great. Living my best life as the whisperer of Koji.
So how did you end up in Mugaritz, Kevin? How did it happen?
So I first heard about Mugaritz, what must have been 2010, 2009. I was working in a restaurant at the time, but the restaurant was closed. It was open 6 days a week, but you would only work 5 of those 6 days. So I had 2 days that I wasn't at the restaurant, and I took a part-time job at a bookstore in Toronto that only sold cookbooks. And basically I got paid to sell cookbooks to the people who came into the store, and besides that, just read as many cookbooks as I wanted. And you would get a discount on cookbooks as well as a staff member. So that was around the same year that the Fiden Mugaritz book came out. And I remember reading it and seeing basically food that I had never seen before. I grew up on the French Laundry cookbook. That was like one of the first most influential cookbooks I ever read.
Classic.
And if you look at photos of the Mugaritz cookbook and photos of the French Laundry cookbook, you can see there's definitely a big difference. And it was very exciting to me to see that kind of food in a cookbook and to be aware of this other restaurant in Spain, right? Because we all knew about El Bulli at the time. That was El Bulli's heyday, was around that time, what was it, 5 straight number ones in the world and things like that. This was before Noma took over as the number 1 restaurant in the world. And Andoni came to Toronto to do a book signing and a book tour to promote his book. And whenever these chefs would come to Toronto to do these tours, they would do it through the bookstore I worked at. We were like a very small independent bookstore, but it was all cookbooks. So it made sense for chefs who were promoting their books to come through that store and promote all their new things. So, like as a side note, that's how I met people like Anthony Bourdain and Nigella Lawson and Daniel Boulud. That's how I met Rene for the first time. And now I work for the guy. But anyways, Andoni came through and set up at the store, did a signing, did a bit of a talk with people in the store through a translator who was Susanna, his assistant at the time. And I just asked him, that was the end of the event. And I told him that I had applied for an internship a year before and had never heard back. And I said, someday I'd like to be an intern for you in San Sebastian, and that my Spanish was terrible / non-existent. And to his credit, he gave me his full attention and said, this is the email to the person who handles internships. Send her an email and then we'll get you in. So there was no wait time or anything like that. That evening, I sent an email to I think it was Yaiza at Mugaritz, who was taking care of all the internships. And then I heard back that they had an opening. And later this must have been in July or August. Later that year in September, I believe, I flew to San Sebastian. I was 21 years old.
It's interesting what you say about the books, because I remember, if I'm not wrong, Phil, that was also the reason you went to Mugaritz, through the book, like what first sparked your thing of going there. And from my side, talking about the first time I saw the French Laundry cookbook was actually at the Mugaritz intern house.
Mm-hmm.
Someone had the book, and I remember I was working in the garden at that moment, and there was a picture of a chef with scissors cutting herbs in a culinary garden, and I was like, wow, this is not like some crazy Basque. Well, actually it is, but like some crazy Basque chefs doing this isolated from anything else in the world. This is something that there are other restaurants doing the same, right? Like having a garden and doing this type of tweezer cooking, and that was completely new for me. I mean, I was like 18 years old. It was like something really impressive.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that seeing the book at Mugaritz for the first time, because Phil, I don't know if you remember this, but I had the Lestrance cookbook ordered from the bookstore I used to work at, shipped to San Sebastian, to the intern house. And I think that might have been the first time you got to see that book as well. Because I remember we were both looking at it in that weird basement dining room area in the house we were living in.
Yeah.
That's crazy because that's your favorite cookbook, right, Phil?
Yeah, I was just about to say, that cookbook like influenced me massively. And it's the only restaurant that I regret not having gotten into. I mean, I set myself very early on. There were like 3 restaurants that I kind of set myself the goal of working at or staging at. And that was Mugaritz, Ryogin, and Faviken. And I managed to get into all of these. I was very fortunate that happened like really, really quickly in my career. But L'Astrance is really sort of like one place that I really regret not having went. I tried to get in, but I never heard anything back. But that cookbook is such an inspiration still. I mean, talking about the French culinary cookbook and stuff like that, I still like once in a while I take it into my hand and I kind of read through it and, you know, the processes and the broths and the sauces and that.
It is.
But there's no cookbook like the L'Astrance cookbook. It really kind of hits the pitch of kind of like what I feel passionate about in cooking. It has this like it's very unique, very, very unique. Yeah. And I spent fucking days reading that book, like in the Imas Day kitchen, like in the break that we sometimes had in between services. If there was like a break, I would go into the Imas Day kitchen and read the books that were there in the library. And more often than not, I would read the L'Astrance cookbook and look at that little side manual of like step by step of like how to make the mushroom tart or how to roast a pigeon.
Or the miso eggplant that he did, right? Or he steamed it and pressed it and then bruleed it and it was like custard.
Yeah. The Naso Dengaku version, yeah.
We do that in the test kitchen until they kicked us out because we were supposed to be on siesta.
I've said it many times that maybe the most technical chef I've seen working was a French-Japanese guy called Shinichi Sato, who was a stagiaire at Mugaritz in my time when I was there. And he was like a L'Astrance veteran. So the first time I knew who Pascal Barbeau was because he walked into the kitchen and everybody was, oh, he's there. Everybody was impressed, and suddenly the Japanese was like, hey man, what's up? You know, like just saying hi to me. He was he did like the fish section for a few years in L'Astrance. Also, the first time that I saw the guys from Disfrutar, they were still working at El Bulli back then.
Yeah,
this was 2005, you know. Also, they walk into the kitchen and I was like, who are these guys? And they were like, you don't know? Like,
yeah, nice.
So, and how did you guys meet each other? I also want to know about that. Like, you lived in the same apartment or how was it exactly?
So I had been an intern at Mugaritz for the end of the 2011 season. I think, yeah, it's 2011. And then when we came back, I was asked to come back for the Imas Day period where they basically develop the new menu for the months of February and March to be debuted in April when the restaurant reopened, because the restaurant basically closes at the Christmas holiday and doesn't reopen until the early spring. So they had me come back and help them out with that. And I think, Phil, did you come for part of that as well? Or did you come when we started service days and things like that?
I was one of the first to arrive for the new season. I came like 2 or 3 weeks before the service day started. So I had sort of like one of the first picks in the house apart from who was left there from the Imas Day period. But yeah, I came in. I didn't do any Imas Day or anything. Like I came straight in the beginning for the service days. Yeah.
And you showed up with like no luggage. I remember this. You were just like, it was like you showed up with a knapsack or something.
Yeah, because I didn't have anything, man. I didn't own anything.
He had to burn all his things because he had like one week to leave Berlin, man.
I left, like, I don't know how much of that, like, you kind of like picked up, but I mean, I arrived at Mugaritz like pretty bashed up. I had like cuts and bruises in my face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I remember you told me you were stopped in every airplane control in every airport. You please step aside. We want to check you a little bit more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I literally went to the airport from like a nightclub. back then. It was a bit rough. Yeah.
You left Berghain and then went to your internship at Mugaritz, basically, is what you say.
Catablau. He left Catablau after 3 days.
No, it was actually Club der Visionäre. And I had lost my passport in the club and I had to find it again. And the bouncer was like, "Why the fuck are you?" Like somebody handed my passport to the bouncer, and I was like looking everywhere for it. And then I find it, and I'm sort of like, "Oh my god, thank you so much, thank you." And he's like, "Okay, sorry, why the fuck are you here with a passport in your pocket and like a backpack in the corner?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I got this plane to catch to Spain."
When we opened the season, you were on pastry.
Yes.
And Jess was on pastry. And Shannon was on pastry. I was on pastry. And then our CDP was Jade, who was her first CDP position. Yeah, Jade, who would go on to be the head chef of Mugaritz. I don't know what year afterwards.
We should also invite Jade to the show. She's doing an amazing wine right now.
Yeah, she's on a luxurious vacation in Mallorca right now, I think. That's why I haven't been able to meet up with her, because I really wanted to see her. We were good friends. We were both working at Mugaritz.
Yeah.
But I was listening to an episode, one of the previous Mugaritz episodes, and you're talking about the celery, the regaliz, the licorice, the bane of your existence, where you had to coat the celery in a thin caramel of black caramel.
Yes.
I don't know if you mentioned it. I don't even know if you knew, but I made that dish for Ima's Day.
Did you actually?
Yeah, that was my dish.
I didn't knew.
Fuck.
And I remember thinking, like, this is going to be so hard to do. I really hope it's not on my section.
So that's actually how you met.
I was telling Eric about it too, because the version you did is actually the easy version. Because at one point, Oswaldo, like I was working with Oswaldo during the EMS Day period. He was like my commanding officer, and I'd report to him. And he wanted it to look like a classic black licorice candy. So he wanted it to have ridges and things on it. So there was a setup where you had the lactosa. The way you do it, the lactosa is in the container, but this way was lactosa in a stainless steel bowl, and then the base of the sauce gun, like the little funnel where you can pull the trigger, the sauce comes out the funnel, and then when you let go of the trigger, the sauce stops.
Yeah,
the little stand that you put that sauce gun in was in the bowl of lactosa, and then you would take the ring mold of the perfect film of caramel, quickly take it out, put it into it sits in this stand for the funnel, spin the bowl, and then as it's spinning, slowly drop the celery through so that you had that spiral ridges on the cake.
Did that work?
It worked, but both Oswaldo and I were like, don't do that. Because you can imagine, like, this is for like 1 or 2 pieces, or you're trying to do like in a service where it's like 5 or 6 of these. How many bowls are you going to have going? Like there's going to be one intern in the back of the 2 Michelin star kitchen spinning stainless steel holes and dropping celery through a ring mold. Like that'll never happen. So what you got was actually the easy version, Phil Walter.
Yeah. And I mean, like it's just like you say, it was kind of like doing one was fine, you know? Doing the second one was maybe okay also, you know? But then like doing the third one and the fourth one, by the time you did the fourth one, like I remember this like one service where I was just like, there were just like 5, it was obviously one of the first services like in the first month after this like mock service period had passed. And Julieta was just shouting at me, and Jade also, you know, he was just screaming at me. It's just like, why the fuck is that regaliz? And I was just like, by the time I do the fourth one, the first one is like soggy and like and it's just getting sent back. And I was like, man, I can't physically.
We're running out of celery.
Keep saying this. This is, you know, it's just Sisyphus pushing up a boulder up the hill.
Yeah, and this was you were on the same section. This and the no Russo. Well, the kuzu, was it kuzu meringue? No, it was some other kind of meringue. You had to make.
No, it was kuzu.
And then cut perfect squares out of it. And you had it was a coffee buttercream. That was delicious. I helped myself to a coffee buttercream on many an occasion, just like on a spoon or on a finger or something like that. It's delicious.
It was very good.
But that was also something like it had to be built a la minute or something. And it was like very rarely was it correct. So you were just taking it on all ends. About all of your mise en place is just disastrous. But it had nothing to do with you. It was just very difficult recipes.
Man, honestly, but it was like, that was my first, like me dipping my toes into like the Mugaritz experience. And that was my first section. I had the fucking Regaliz and the Russo. I feel like I mentioned it before because this kuzu meringue, it disappeared in your mouth. And it was like actually a cool idea of having this like very heavy looking, buttery sort of Russian honey cake looking like a dessert that when you eat it completely disappears. And there was only buttercream like on the outside, but on the inside, it was like lactose powder and instant coffee powder. So you have the flavor of this like coffee cake, but none of the like heaviness and creaminess. But you would like scrape, try to hold this like meringue sandwich and try to like with an offset spatula scrape the buttermilk on the sides neatly without the meringue getting stained. But also it's like sweltering 30 degrees outside. That's how I remember it anyway.
The meringue sticking to your fingers and disappearing in your fingerprints and things like that.
Exactly. And oh my God, it was just a nightmare. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, as you say, like, oh, you got it from like all the ends. But I was actually just thinking like, I'm just shit at this, like I'm just really bad at this job. Yeah.
What about Phil running in the mornings? The story you told me, Kevin.
Yeah, Phil, lasting impression I have of you, apart from our many chuleta excursions where we had chuleta for dessert as well, which we might talk about in a little bit as well, was just for a good chunk of time when we were living together, you would run barefoot. Like you would just go for a run in the Basque Country with no shoes on. And I was like, who is this guy? Like, what a lunatic. But it would be like, you wouldn't have running shorts. You were in jeans and like a purple hoodie or something. You just go running.
I didn't actually remember this until like Eric teased the fact that you guys talked about this the other day, and it just all came back to me. And I mean, yeah, I can, now with a bit of distance, I can see how that might seem really unhinged too, because I mean, it was. But I didn't own any running shorts. I didn't own any running shoes. So yeah.
Oh, okay, that's the reason. That makes sense. Okay.
And living on the side of a mountain, there's nothing to do.
Yeah, I enjoyed my mountain man runs. I mean, the Basque Country is really exceptionally beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It was it's a very strange sort of like living situation that we had there. I mean, like with this, like you have to imagine a big house in between two villages, fairly small villages in the Basque countryside on top of a hill.
It was not a hill. It was a mountain. We climbed it was a half-hour walk up a mountain from the nearest grocery store.
I think a hill doesn't really explain it, does it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I one time tried to skate down this hill. I bought like a little penny board.
Oh my God.
I don't know why I thought that was a good idea because it's like steep as fuck. So I start going down this hill. I had brand new shoes, like brand new Vans. And I start going down this hill and I realized, man, this was a really, really terrible idea because either I just commit and I go like 80 miles an hour down this fucking hill, or I go for the side and try not to hit a cow. Or option number 3, I'll try to break my speed right now. So I put my foot down, the tip of my foot, and try to break the speed. And the fucking road just burned a hole through my entire shoe onto my toe. So I had to go for option 2. Yeah. And so it was a mountain, yeah. But yeah, what a strange living situation, no? I mean, sort of like the characters that we lived in and kind of like a lot of the people, like I also forgot about. At one point, Eric and me, we were talking about people quitting in the stage. And like, I remember there was this one guy who was with us like for 2 weeks. And then in the morning,
and he climbed out a window.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. I wasn't sure whether I remembered it correctly because it sounds so ludicrous. Like he couldn't open the door for some reason. He just threw his backpack.
Yeah, and he climbed out the window. Like we're all like there, and we're like, "What's this guy doing?" He puts his backpack out the window, jumps out, and it starts walking. Like, all right, guess it wasn't for him.
I mean, just say you're leaving. That's perfectly fine. Like nobody's going to hit you or something.
Yeah, I mean, we were just like all getting ready to like collectively drive to the restaurant in the morning, and this guy just bolts, which is very strange because you're like in the middle of fucking nowhere. Like there's nowhere to go to, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, our group especially, there's a lot of people who went on to do great things as well. Like Santiago, obviously, of Cole now in Mayfair in London. Was on the cover of GQ magazine or something like that. I give him shit about that all the time. I'm like, remember us small people when you couldn't make lentejas properly for staff meal.
You didn't just say that.
Chet has one of the best Indian restaurants in London right now. I mean, Jess is at Gerald's. Shannon was working at some excellent restaurants in Chicago now. Or she was. I don't know where she is now. But her and I have lost touch, unfortunately. But I send her a message every so often. But there's a lot of cool people that we met in that house. Like, there were like 20 of us. And
yeah, absolutely.
For me, I liked it. I know maybe you had your moments of not liking so many people being around all the time. But for me personally, being around people who were into what I was into, like food and cooking and restaurants. And, there were days where you and I would like look at photos of the tasting menu at Alinea or something like that. Like, that's something I never experienced in my life before. I never was able to do that with friends from school or family or anything like that. So to me, I look at those 11 months living in that house as like a very formative part of my life is the friendships and the people I got to meet and live with.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, for me, I have to say exactly the same. I never was like in a place surrounded by people where you could share cookbooks and talk about the culinary techniques. And that's actually what we would do all day long. We would work in a restaurant, in a fine dining restaurant, and then talk about work and techniques and this kind of thing. So that was kind of like the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And like for me, honestly, especially when this, discussion comes up, it's sort of like, staging, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? And, I mean, like I learned some things at Mugaritz, it's not the style of food that like I cook, or that I want to cook. I still learned a lot of stuff. But for me, by far, the most valuable thing, the thing that I really like appreciate and treasure the most, honestly, is like absolutely invaluable to me is, exactly that is the people that you meet and the like lifelong friendships, like the friendships that you and I have, it's just like, for me, that's something so extremely special and valuable. And I could not imagine, not having that. It was super, apart from the fact that so much knowledge is shared and so many impressions, it's like what you're saying, like, it's not just about working there, but like on your days off, like the times we made like, chili crab with Terrence and bakute and stuff like that. And like going out to eat and just kind of having these experiences and not just having these culinary experiences and inputs, but also being able to kind of ping pong off each other and talk about it.
Many del dias at Frenchia.
Yeah.
all those great moments.
Yeah.
Do you remember when there was the top 50, the 50 best restaurants and we streamed it at the house?
Yes. Of course.
Because someone, I don't know if it was me or someone else got it on their computer and we had like a massive viewing party of all of us in the living room. There's a photo of us crowded onto a single couch in like whatever semblance of pajamas we had on because it was on a day off. And everyone did wagers and bets on who would get number one and we all watched it together. Like that was really cool.
Do you have that photo?
Yeah, it's somewhere. I'll send it to you after we record.
Oh, please. That would be amazing. Yeah.
Kevin, what can you say about Mugaritz philosophy and your thoughts on it? Like the working methodology and all these kind of things.
So, I mean, right now, as of recording, I had several people send me this TikTok video of some influencer who went to Mugaritz and hated everything. And they vlogged the whole meal. And they were like, yeah, it's just this and this with barbecue sauce. And this didn't taste good. And they gave me a weird, fuzzy, moldy potato blanket. And they didn't buy into it. And the first thing that they say to us when we stage at Mugaritz, and I don't know if it's the same for you, Eric, when you stage there too, but they say that they're not trying to be the most delicious restaurant in the world. They want to be provocative.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was already part of the core thought back then, already in 2005. Yeah. I think that's from the very beginning.
Yeah, and they're not trying to make a tasting menu of, stunner 10 out of 10 perfect dishes. They're trying to provoke thoughts and perspective, and they're looking at it in the same way that an artist looks at a canvas in a gallery, right? Like there's the famous, a few years ago, someone duct taped a banana to a wall and in a gallery, and people lost their minds over like, this isn't art, this is like parody or whatever. And in the end, that banana, like for what, $2, of banana and a little piece of duct tape strapped to a wall had millions of people around the world talking about it. And if that is not art, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Mugaritz is trying to do. They're not trying to make delicious food. They just want you to experience emotion and self-thought and opinion and hopefully growth over the course of a meal so that when you leave, you're different than when you walk through the doors. And I think that's something people can't grasp if they're trying to go to a 2 Michelin star restaurant the classic way.
I think that's exactly what they're best at. Like this kind of contextualizing and involving your experience in a storytelling setting better than anyone else. I cannot think of another restaurant who is better at that, because I can think of other restaurants that are better, perhaps more technical or more delicious or something else. But this specific thing, maybe, I don't know, maybe the Verxo comes to mind, but I don't know them that well, but that pops up so that I could think of. But I mean, up until then, nobody went as deep through that path as they did. And I think that's quite an achievement. Like the story you told me the other day where they were like, what was it? Croquetas, that one was broken. Do you want to tell the story? That Donnie came out to the table and said, "Oh, I'm giving you this one because this is the best way to have it."
Was that me or was that someone else? I was there when that story was told. I don't think I told it though.
Well, the story was maybe it was John Regefolk.
Oh, it might have been, yeah, because we were all outside of the Sociedad talking.
Yeah, that there were like, I don't know, like let's say croqueta, just to say an idea. It could be whatever, like a different dish of something. But there were like 4 pieces, and one was like broken. You know, it has like a line where the filling would come out, and in that specific moment, it wasn't possible to replace it, so it had to go out. You know, like what do you do in that moment? You know, like how do you fix that? So like, I don't know if the story is true or not, but it's a very good story. So like that Andoni himself went out, and to the person who would get the broken one, he told him, "You're getting the broken one because this is the best way when it breaks because blah, 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 whatever." Right. So, and I think the lesson here is transforming a mistake into like you're not the loser for getting the broken one. You're the luckiest one. Right.
Yeah, everything's relative. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And this kind of thing, like understanding that and such a sensorial experience as it is going to a restaurant, these things really have an impact in your experience. These things really change. These are the memorable moments, or the ones you will talk about, like the banana on the wall, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like back in the day, I don't think like they still did that when we were there. But I mean, back in the day, you would get an envelope at Mugaritz, and one said submit and the other said rebel or something like that, right?
Yeah, in my times we had it too.
Yeah, and I mean, like that kind of like really sums it up. It's sort of like, well, you know, you can kind of like, you know, go against it a little bit, and all right, you're still going to get like interesting and nice food, or you can like really actually submit and kind of let go of the ideas that you bring with you into the restaurant, and just really open your mind and let yourself get taken along this, you know, brainchild of these chefs that maybe will resonate with you, you know? And I think that's really cool. I don't really know a lot of restaurants where they do that, where there's like very specific ideas or like uncomfortable feelings that are like getting tackled. It's almost like therapy in a way, you know? It's kind of like the moldy apple or something like that, you know? Or the tempeh with the grass, you know, or even like, you know, you remember the vanilla bean?
Yeah, the helecho.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that was so cool. It was such a small thing. And it was like, I mean, you know, like it was okay. It didn't taste bad or anything. But I thought that the idea of like, you know, when you have this juicy vanilla pod and you kind of just like, it just looks so inviting to bite into it, but you can't eat it. And then making that possible, that you can actually bite into this really juicy vanilla pod. I thought this was such a cool, like,
because the helecho, it was like a fern or something, right? It was something like a fiddlehead fern or something.
Fiddlehead fern, and it gets fermented in ash. And yeah, it gets like boiled and then fermented in ash or whatever. And then it just basically just changes the texture, and then it gets infused with vanilla and coated in vanilla sugar, and then put into a glass.
The little tube that the vanilla comes in, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. In a glass tube. And it's so like, it's kind of like, it's not a lot, right? But because you have this like, association with it, and suddenly something that's not been possible before is possible to you. It kind of breaks your perception of reality a little bit. And that's really, really cool.
Well, did you ever eat at Mugaritz?
I didn't actually.
No?
I was too poor.
I did when I was there in 2005, and they had two menus, the Naturan, which was avant-garde, and the Sustraiak. Naturan means nature and Sustraiak means roots in Basque. So I had the Sustraiak one, and super nice menu. I still, for me, that's my favorite epoch in Mugaritz, like the chlorophilia epoch. And I still have the book here at home, and I open it, and I think those pictures are beautiful, and the recipes would come with this free writing, like poems and prose about specific herbs. It's a beautiful book.
Did you eat at Mugaritz?
I finally ate there in 2022, a decade after I finished my internship, just to like kind of close the circle because I was curious about it. And the first course on that menu was the ceramic of a face where they would put the onion gel and flowers, and you were supposed to, they're like, this is to mimic the first kiss or the first like hot makeout of your life. And you're supposed to just pick up the face and like make out with the ceramic and eat the flowers and the gel and everything all together. And it's like, it's an icebreaker because it's the first course of the menu, right? So it's at that point, that's their statement. They have to, you decide then to buy in or to submit or to resist. And I was at Solo Diner. So I'm sitting at this table making out with my porcelain face by myself. Like I completely bought it and I loved it. And then I look over and there's a foretop of like, I think Dutch tourists who didn't buy in, and like they got this, like we started around the same time, and I'm sure they saw me doing my thing with my face in the corner. And they asked for cutlery because they're like, we're not gonna pick this up and do what you want us to do. Like, and that at that point, you kind of like it ruins it for you. It ruins it for the restaurant.
Yeah,
and then also like the people around you as well, because it's one thing to say no, I want to eat it with cutlery and you're by yourself and no one else sees you. But when if let's say I wasn't as zealous about this dish, if I see another table asking for cutlery and we're like, no, I want cutlery too, because I'm self-conscious about doing this. Like it's really cool that you're around other people when they ask you, and they ask you to, break down your barriers and submit and invest in the experience you're about to have. And was it the best meal I've ever had? Absolutely not. But I'm glad I ate there and experience the art and the perspective of the restaurant that, 10 years ago was so formative in my career. Like for me, it was a very, very cool closing of the circle, and to see the sala again and to see the kitchen and to see where I wiped out carrying a tray of golinas on the slippery floor and where the heat lamps were that kept hitting me in the head because I'm tall and they would pull them low and things like that. Like it was nice to have that whole experience that I hadn't had after finishing my internship.
I also went back there in 2016, and the second time, I mean, it was a nice experience. I have nothing to say against it, but it's not kind of like the kind of experience I look for, I have to say. Like I look like more straightforward food, like a Suberoa or an Echevarri or an Elcano or this kind of places. But it's a matter of preference.
I have a closing question, and that's so from when you've eaten there and the time that you've worked there, what's your favorite Mugaritz dish and why?
Am I going first, or is Eric going first, or are you going first?
No, this question is just for you, actually.
Oh, it's just for me.
But I want to answer too.
Okay, well, let Eric go first. And you can think. Yeah.
Okay, Eric goes first.
Cooking for sure was when I was in the pastry, the deshielo, which was like a pistachio biscuit with a matcha tea kusu. What else did it have? Like a frozen foam of orange blossom. What else? Yeah, I think that was it. And I did hundreds of those, and it was I learned many techniques with that dish, and I also had to to the portion of the frozen foams in the freezer inside at minus 40 degrees. So it was quite an experience.
See, that sounds delicious, honestly.
Yeah, it was an amazing dish. I loved it.
Yeah. I thought you would. I would have thought you would say the salad,
potato rocks.
Yeah, the potato rocks.
And eating, there are a few, like the becada. I remember loving the becada. I also remember the foie gras was amazing. And also these potatoes that we would do that were like turned potatoes in a meat jus with a cow tendon. That was amazing. And it had something else, truffles. It had truffles, yeah.
Nice.
But you see, those dishes were very classical and very straightforward and very succulent and substantial, full, and yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear the different, because you were there at a very different time from Phil and myself. So to hear the dishes that you were preparing versus the dishes we were doing is really cool. I mean, I will always treasure the torrija that we would do for the weddings.
Yes.
Because they would always make me do it because no one else could figure out how to do it.
Same with me. I was also the torrija guy in my time.
Same with me, actually.
With the brulee iron, right? Which was definitely not workplace safe. It was like a hair iron with no safety features on it. So it would just get like nuclear hot, and then you would just have it sitting on a rock on your station. You're like, how is that safe? Right? How is someone not going to touch that and sear themselves? But there was also Phil. I don't know if you remember the chuleta. We would do the chuleta serving, and it'd be like you get like a small tasting menu size piece. But then there was a perfect quenelle of chuleta butter that was half rendered and smoked chuleta fat, and then they added flaxseed mucilage to it, and I think a tanilla, which I still don't know what that is. And then you would blend it in a Thermomix, and it would turn into like an ice cream texture. But it wouldn't, when it was cold, it wouldn't go granular like chuleta fat would, because there was enough emulsifier in there. It kept it creamy. So you get your chuleta with some kind of herbs dressed in jus and this quenelle of chuleta butter. And that butter specifically was really awesome to me. And then I remember we would do a hojaldre of cordero, which is lamb. And it was like the fat cap of the lamb. And we rendered it slowly over the fire, so that the fat all rendered and dropped out, and you were left with basically a skeleton of thin, like protein filaments, so that it shattered like puff pastry. And that was a garnish on the lamb loin that we served. And that was a really cool technique. I really liked. I snacked on a lot of that, and to my own detriment, because that was on my section once I moved over to carnes.
Yeah,
you're not getting away, Phil.
Me. Okay, I definitely have a very specific favorite dish.
So the licorice, yeah,
of course. Followed right by the never realized loose flour salad in a see-through sphere of sugar.
Oh yes, the balloon. I forgot about that.
Yeah, the impossible dream. So I think I mentioned it before, but there was one time where I don't know whether it was because diners had come too many times and they were running out of dishes or something, but Ramon riffed up a dish. It was in autumn, it was game season, and he riffed up this dish of becada, which is snipe, and he basically made like a snipe stew together with salted cod entrails, which sounds horrible, like salted cod tripe.
Like a swim bladder?
Yeah, no, the tripe. Like it was a tripe.
That's actually, it has nothing to do with urine or anything, but it's a swimming bladder.
Yeah. And it was so delicious. It had this gaminess, meatiness, but at the same time, it had this like funky, fishy salt cod flavor, and gave the sauce this like lip smacking stickiness. And I was like, man, that's such a fucking gourmet thing, you know? It's like Saint-Pierre poached in veal jus, you know? This like combination of like a red mullet with like a duck consommé, you know? It's like this kind of really old school but very sensitive cooking of mixing different terrains. And that was absolutely amazing. I thought that was just ridiculously delicious.
And that's it for this week's episode of Potluck Food Talks. If you like what we're doing, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok as Potluck Food Talks. The show airs every Monday.